Take a flatworm and place it on a clean surface. Now cut it directly in half. You would expect one of two things to happen. Either both halves die, or one half survives while the other does not. That is what biology tells us should happen. That is what every instinct about living things says is true. Neither of those things happens with this animal. Both halves survive. Both halves begin to grow. Within a matter of days, each piece starts building whatever it is missing. The half with the head grows a new body. The half with the body grows a brand new head, complete with eyes, a functioning brain, and a nervous system that works exactly as it did before. Two complete animals now exist where one did moments ago. Researchers have pushed this considerably further. They have cut a single planarian into nearly 280 separate pieces, once and every single fragment became a new, fully functioning worm. This animal is called the Planarian Flatworm, and what it can do with its own body is one of the most extraordinary things that exists anywhere on this planet. The Planarian flatworm belongs to a group of animals called platyhelminthes, which simply means flatworms. There are hundreds of species in this group, found in freshwater ponds, slow-moving streams, underneath rocks and wet leaf litter, in marine environments, and even on land in damp soil. They have been living on Earth for hundreds of millions of years, and they are genuinely global, present on every continent except Antarctica. Most species are small, between 3 and 15 millimeters long, though some terrestrial species can grow to 30 centimeters. Their bodies are soft, flat, and slightly leaf-shaped. Their color varies from pale brown or tan to deep black, though some land species are unexpectedly vivid, with patterns of orange, blue, and even iridescent green. The ones most commonly studied in laboratories are the freshwater species, particularly Schmidtea mediterranea and Dugesia japonica, both of which have become central tools in modern biological research. Their anatomy is remarkably simple. They have no circulatory system and no lungs, absorbing oxygen directly through their skin. Because of this, their bodies must stay extremely thin so that oxygen can diffuse through all of their tissues without being pumped. They have no skeleton. They move by gliding on a layer of tiny hair-like structures called cilia on their undersides, leaving a faint trail of mucus as they travel. That simplicity, though, is deeply misleading, because buried inside this ordinary-looking creature is a biological system that has puzzled scientists for over 2 centuries, and that no other animal on Earth has managed to replicate at the same scale. To understand it, we have to start with what happens when this animal gets hurt. Most animals, when injured, do one of 2 things. They heal, meaning the wound closes and scar tissue fills the gap, or they die from the damage. A few animals can do something considerably more impressive than that. Salamanders can regrow entire limbs. Starfish can regrow arms. Deer grow new antlers every single year. These abilities have amazed humans for centuries, and researchers have spent decades trying to understand how they work. But the Planarian flatworm does something that none of those animals can come close to matching. If you cut a planarian in half across the middle, both halves will survive the injury. The front half, which contains the head, begins growing a new tail within hours. The back half, which has no head at all, begins growing a brand new one. Within about a week, depending on the species and the temperature of the water, both pieces have fully regenerated into 2 complete functioning flatworms. They are not damaged versions of the original. They are complete animals with fully formed brains, eyes, nervous systems, digestive organs, and reproductive tissue. Researchers have cut planarians into far more than just 2 pieces. Thomas Hunt Morgan, the scientist who later won the Nobel Prize for his work on genetics, studied planarians extensively in the late 1800s and discovered that a single flatworm could be divided into a maximum of 279 separate pieces, and every single fragment would regenerate into a new, complete worm. That was over 100 years ago, and modern science has confirmed it again and again, using controlled laboratory conditions and high-resolution imaging. What makes this even stranger is how each regenerating piece knows what to become. A fragment taken from the middle of a worm, containing no head and no tail, still manages to produce exactly one head and exactly one tail, arranged in the correct orientation. It does not produce two heads, it does not produce two tails. It does not become confused about which end is which. The fragment reads positional information already embedded in its own tissues and uses it to rebuild the missing parts in the right places. Scientists have found that this positional information is stored primarily in the muscle cells of the worm's body rather than in its nervous system. The muscle cells act as a kind of biological map, continuously broadcasting signals that tell surrounding cells where they are relative to the rest of the body. When even in a tiny isolated fragment, that map remains intact and regeneration begins from it. When the wound site seals within hours of injury, a cluster of cells forms at the edge of the cut called a blastema. The blastema is essentially a construction site, a growing mass of dividing cells that will become whatever body part is missing. Within this structure, extraordinarily precise development takes place, guided entirely by the positional signals in the surrounding tissue. Eyes form where eyes should be. A brain forms where a brain should be. The gut extends in exactly the right direction. The entire process takes roughly 1 to 2 weeks from beginning to end. For an animal rebuilding a complete brain, nervous system, and sensory organs from nothing, that speed is almost incomprehensible. But once you understand what is happening at the cellular level, the mechanism starts to make sense, and that is where things get even more interesting. The reason planarians can do what other animals cannot comes down to a specialized population of cells distributed throughout their entire bodies called neoblasts. These are not ordinary cells, and understanding what they do is the key to understanding everything else about this animal. In most adult animals, including humans, stem cells, the cells capable of transforming into multiple different cell types, are limited in number and confined to specific locations in the body. Your bone marrow produces blood cells. Specific regions of your brain hold a small reserve of neural stem cells. The lining of your intestine maintains stem cells that replace worn-out digestive tissue. But these cells are tightly regulated, present in very small numbers, and each is generally restricted to producing only certain cell types. That tight control exists because allowing stem cells to divide freely and become anything they want is extremely dangerous. In fact, that is precisely what cancer is. The planarian has solved this problem in a way that defies most of what we expect from biology. Approximately 20% of all cells in a planarian's body are neoblasts at any given moment. In a human being, having that proportion of your body composed of freely dividing stem cells would represent a medical catastrophe. In this animal, it is simply how the body functions day to day. What is more, planarian neoblasts are pluripotent, meaning they are capable of becoming essentially any cell type in the body. Research published in Cell Reports in October 2025 from the Stowers Institute for Medical Research in Kansas City revealed something remarkable about how these cells behave. Unlike stem cells in most animals, which live in fixed locations and receive their instructions from immediately neighboring cells, planarian stem cells operate without a fixed home. The researchers described them as making their friends along the way, receiving guidance not from cells directly beside them, but from cells located much further across the body, including intestinal cells communicating across long distances. This makes the system dynamic and flexible in a way that most animals' bodies are simply not designed to be. When a planarian is injured, our neoblasts migrate rapidly to the wound site and begin dividing to produce the exact cell types needed to replace whatever was lost. They do not overproduce. They do not generate the wrong tissues. The researchers at the Stowers Institute describe the process as a combination of local signals and global communication networks working simultaneously to keep regeneration precise and anatomically correct. The result is perfect reconstruction every time, without forming tumors, without producing misshapen tissue, and without aging in the process. Understanding precisely how this animal manages that final part brought researchers to one of the most surprising discoveries in the entire story of the planarian. In 2013, biologist Michael Levin and his colleague Tal Shomrat at Tufts University published a study in the Journal of Experimental Biology that genuinely unsettled a significant portion of what scientists believed about how memory works. Here is what they did. They took groups of Planarian flatworms from the species Dugesia japonica and placed them in petri dishes with textured floors. Over 10 days, the worms learned to associate that textured environment with the presence of food, gradually overcoming their natural aversion to bright light in order to feed in an illuminated section of the dish. The learning was tracked using automated video analysis to eliminate any possibility of human observer bias. Then the researchers cut off the worms' heads. The decapitated bodies were placed in smooth, floored containers and left for 2 weeks while their heads regenerated from scratch. New brain, new eyes, new neural connections, rebuilt entirely from the stem cells that had survived the cut. After 2 weeks, the researchers tested the newly regenerated worms again to see how quickly they would relearn the same behavior they had been trained in before decapitation. The worms relearned it almost immediately. Animals that had never been trained required the full 10-day conditioning period to develop the behavior. The worms that had been decapitated and grown entirely new brains needed only one brief reminder session before the original behavior returned. The memory had somehow survived the complete removal of the brain that originally formed it. Levin's interpretation of this result was as striking as the result itself. He proposed that memories in planarians are not stored exclusively in brain tissue, but are distributed throughout the body, potentially encoded in the electrical states of cells outside the nervous system entirely. When a new brain grows back, those peripheral tissues imprint their stored information onto the fresh neural architecture during development. The new brain, in effect, inherits the memory from the body that built it. As Levin explained at the time, what they appeared to be seeing was evidence of information storage and processing capabilities belonging to all cells and tissues, not just neurons. So he also noted that planarians are considered among the earliest organisms on the evolutionary tree to have developed a true centralized brain with synaptic transmission, and that their neurotransmitter systems share meaningful similarities with vertebrate brains, including the human brain. The implications for understanding memory loss in Alzheimer's disease, the effects of stem cell-based therapies on existing memories, and the fundamental question of where a self actually lives in a body have occupied researchers in this field ever since. And there is one more layer to this story that makes the planarian even harder to place within ordinary biology. Every time a human cell divides, the protective caps at the ends of its chromosomes, called telomeres, get slightly shorter. This is one of the central mechanisms of biological aging. When telomeres wear down too far, cells lose the ability to divide properly, accumulate errors in their genetic material, and eventually stop functioning. The body gradually fills with deteriorating, non-renewing cells that it can no longer replace. Most people would simply call this process getting old. The planarian does not appear to undergo it. Research from scientists at the University of Nottingham showed that asexual planarian species, meaning those that reproduce by splitting their bodies rather than through sexual reproduction, actively maintain their telomere length indefinitely. During regeneration, their neoblasts dramatically increase the production of an enzyme called telomerase, which rebuilds and extends the worn chromosome caps so that cell division can continue without accumulating damage. Each time the animal regrows a lost part, it also resets the cellular clock that drives aging in most other organisms. The Nottingham researchers concluded that these worms demonstrate the potential for a theoretically immortal life history. This does not mean that nothing can kill them. They can starve, be poisoned, or be physically destroyed in ways that leave no viable tissue behind. But in terms of internal biological aging, the progressive cellular deterioration that causes age-related disease and eventual death in nearly every other animal, The planarian appears to have found a stable and reliable way to avoid it entirely. Each time the animal reproduces by dividing itself in two, which is how it most commonly creates offspring, both resulting halves regenerate completely from their own tissue. Neither half inherits an older, more deteriorated version of the body. Both emerge as fully renewed organisms. The lineage of cells never truly grows old. Some researchers have described this condition as somatic immortality, where the body's tissues remain in a state of active, continuous maintenance rather than gradual decline. The question that follows is obvious and important. If this animal divides freely, maintains an enormous population of stem cells, continuously replaces its own tissues, and never ages at the cellular level, then why does it not develop cancer? That is one of the most pressing questions currently being asked in laboratories studying this creature, and the answer to it could matter enormously for human medicine. Before we get to what medicine hopes to learn from this animal, it is worth spending a moment on who the planarian actually is when it is simply going about its life. Because for all of its extraordinary internal biology, the Planarian flatworm also lives a surprisingly aggressive external existence that most people never consider. These animals are carnivores. Freshwater species hunt small invertebrates including rotifers, water fleas, tiny crustaceans, and other worms, detecting their prey through chemical signals dissolved in the surrounding water. They are far more effective hunters than their simple anatomy might suggest. They can sense the disturbance created by struggling prey in the water and navigate directly toward it. Once a planarian reaches its target, when it extends a muscular feeding tube called a pharynx out through an opening on the underside of its body and uses it to grip and consume its meal. The larger terrestrial species, those that live on land under leaf litter and in forest soil, are even more dramatic. They track earthworms through the soil by following chemical trails left behind, then wrap their entire flattened bodies around the worm and secrete mucus that simultaneously immobilizes the prey and begins digesting it externally. Some land planarians are capable of taking on prey 10 to 20 times their own body mass in this way. Certain species are also chemically armed. Research has identified tetrodotoxin in some planarian species, which is one of the most potent natural toxins known to biology. The same compound is found in a small number of other animals worldwide, one including certain species of pufferfish and some poison dart frogs. Planarians appear to use it both as a defensive secretion to deter predators and as a paralytic tool to subdue prey more efficiently during a hunt. From a behavioral standpoint, planarians are also among the most strongly light-sensitive animals on Earth. They actively avoid illuminated environments and prefer to hunt in complete darkness, beneath rocks, and along shaded areas of stream beds. Their primitive but functional eye spots are incapable of forming visual images, but they respond with great precision to changes in light intensity and direction, guiding the worm away from exposure at all times. The planarian's combination of unlimited regeneration, age-resistant stem cells, distributed memory, and cancer-free cell division has placed it at the center of some of the most consequential biological research happening today. Laboratories at Tufts, Cornell, the NIH's National Cancer Institute, the Stowers Institute, and the Whitehead Institute at MIT are all actively using this animal to ask questions with direct implications for human health. There are three areas where the stakes are particularly high. The first is tissue regeneration. Humans and other mammals cannot regrow significant amounts of lost tissue. We heal wounds and replace some categories of blood and skin cells, but we cannot regenerate fingers, repair damaged hearts, restore destroyed spinal cord tissue, or replace brain neurons lost to injury or disease. That limitation causes an enormous amount of irreversible human suffering. The planarian rebuilds every single one of those tissue types routinely, directed by positional signals stored in muscle cells and carried out by freely migrating stem cells throughout the body. Mapping exactly how those signals are structured, how stem cells read and respond to them, and how the entire process stays precise could eventually provide a working blueprint for inducing similar responses in mammalian tissue. The second is cancer. The fundamental problem in cancer is that cells begin dividing outside the normal rules, growing uncontrollably and forming tumors. This is almost exactly what would be expected to happen in an animal where 20% of the body consists of freely dividing stem cells. So the fact that it does not happen in the planarian means this animal has evolved a system of cell division control that operates by different rules than what biology previously assumed. The 2025 Stowers Institute study found that planarian stem cells function without the fixed physical niche structure that was previously believed to be the primary anti-tumor safeguard in most organisms. Identifying the actual mechanism that keeps these cells in check could open completely new approaches to cancer prevention and treatment. The third is neurological disease and memory. The tufts. Finding that learned behavior persists through complete brain regeneration has raised a genuinely difficult question for Alzheimer's research. If memory is encoded not only in neurons, but distributed across other tissues in the body, and if a regenerating brain can retrieve that information from surrounding cells during development, then the accepted model that Alzheimer's disease permanently destroys memory by destroying neurons may be incomplete. Michael Levin has argued that understanding the physical substrate of memory in planarians could eventually inform therapies aimed at preserving or recovering memory in patients with degenerative brain conditions. Each of these three directions is still in early stages, but the planarian is providing traction on all of them at once, which is something no other single model organism has managed to offer. Here is what is worth sitting with after all of this. The Planarian flatworm is not large or fast or dangerous. It does not live in some remote corner of the world that requires an expedition to reach. It lives in the stream at the edge of a park, under a wet rock in a garden, in the mud at the bottom of a pond that most people have spent their entire lives walking past without giving a second thought. And yet, this animal has essentially neutralized biological aging in its own body. It keeps its memories even after its entire brain is removed and rebuilt from scratch. It regenerates any part of itself with perfect anatomical accuracy over and over again, without limit. It maintains an enormous population of freely dividing stem cells throughout its body every single day without ever developing cancer. Yet the natural world has been running biological experiments for hundreds of millions of years longer than we have. And the evidence keeps suggesting that some of the most important answers to the hardest problems in medicine are waiting in the smallest and most overlooked creatures. If this kind of video is what you come here for, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep making them. Drop the animal or creature you want covered next in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.